We're just going to look at 17 to 18 to begin with, and then we're going to look at some verses in chapter 8 and chapter 9 as we go through. Genesis chapter 6, verse 17, 18. Continuing our series on the covenants of God. Tonight we're going to look at the Noahic Covenant, Genesis 6, 17 through 18. Bible says, "And behold, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons and thy wife and thy sons' wives with thee." Let's pray, and then we'll begin. Dear Lord, thank you for a time of prayer. Thank you for the ability to come before you. Now I pray that you would just help us as we look into your word, and Lord, to maybe look beyond just the many Sunday school lessons and look to your promises and your interaction and relation to mankind, that we could learn from that. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so in our series here, we went through, what was the first covenant as we went through it? Edenic, right? Edenic, right? So you sound smart. All you do is you get Eden and you add IC, and all of a sudden you can sound like a theologian. Edenic, right? So, and we talked about the fact that some folks just have the Adamic covenant. They break that into part 1 and part 2. I prefer looking at an Edenic covenant. That was the covenant that God made with Adam prior to the fall in the garden. And was it conditional or unconditional? Conditional, right? And the condition was? Don't eat. Okay. And of course, we know the result of that. And it's still in effect, right? The result of the curse of sin. Now, Adamic covenant was after the fall. And what did God promise Adam? Just maybe one of the promises. Work would be hard. Yeah, right? That the seed of the woman. That was the big. So there were a bunch of promises that were kind of negative, we could say that. But the big promise was that the seed of the woman would bruise, right, the head of the serpent, and that is a blessing. So we see after the fall, the second or the first covenant after the fall is a covenant of, yes, it has the promises of what will happen with sin, but it's a promise of grace, grace to come. And so tonight, I'm not going to belabor those. Tonight we're going to look at the Noahic Covenant. Again, if you've taught or been in Sunday school classes, you're very familiar with this. If you have like the Little Tykes toys where it has Noah and the ark, even kids play with it that don't know what they're playing with. So we looked at here in Genesis chapter 6, God's promise to Noah that he would make a covenant with him. We see in verse 5 through 8, it says, "And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I created from the face of this earth, both man and beast and creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repented me that I have made him. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord." All right, so that's the backstory. I'm assuming it's Wednesday night. We know that, but Noah found grace. And we're going to see here that God makes this covenant with Noah, that he gives foreknowledge, if you will, that the covenant will be made in the section that we read in verse 17 and 18. And so God calls Noah into the ark, right? He floods the earth and the waters retreat. God calls Noah out of the ark with his family. And immediately there, Noah creates an altar, gives offerings to the Lord. In response to the offerings, the Lord said in Genesis 8:21 through 22, "And the Lord again smelled a sweet savor, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease." What this shows us is that God was well pleased with Noah's accepted sacrifice, and it gives us a deeper look at what the promised covenant will look like, but this isn't the covenant. Okay, so then we start in Genesis 9, and it says God blesses Noah. If we were to look at that, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth." And he goes through and gives them basically a recap of the instructions that he gave Adam. And he says, but there's some new information based on the fall. All the beasts will fear them. Every animal is now to be food, not just the plants, right? And now that death is in the world, they're not to eat blood as it carries the life. And they're not to take the life of men, and if they do, their life will be acquired. Those are the instructions that God gives Noah and his sons. And so God ends the summary again with the fact that they're to be fruitful and to multiply, which is the original plan. So some people have included Genesis 9, 1 through 7 in the Noahic Covenant. And they would say that this was part of the covenant or promise that God gives to Noah because they connect it with what I read in verse 8 with his proclamation that God will make a covenant with Noah. I believe 1 through 7 is truth. It's a command of God. Some of it is new information based on the fallen nature of man, but it is a summary of command that was already given with respect to this new information by the fall. Either way, whether you include it as a part of the Noahic covenant or you don't, it really makes no bearing on what we're going to look at. And when God introduces the covenant specifically that he makes with Noah in verse 8, 1 through 7 is not at all in focus. So even if we say we believe it's part of the covenant or we don't believe it's part of the covenant, it's not part of God's focus and it won't change our study at all. So you have some liberty there. People believe different things. One of the things that is usually pointed to in that section of Scripture that dispensationalists use, dispensationalists believe that God has ordained specific sets of time and has worked with mankind in different ways in those different times, is the creation of human government. So when it says that if you're to kill somebody, that your life would be required, right? There's an idea now, capital punishment, that God has ordained that, and therefore there must be some entity or persons to be able to take that into account. Again, that's one verse. Certainly it's something that God has established, it's truth, but I don't believe it's core to the Noahic covenant. And so we're going to look at when God says, I make a covenant, okay, which there's no arguing that it is clear. Genesis 9, 8 through 17, and this is really the core text. And God spake unto Noah and to his sons with him, saying, and I, behold, I establish my covenant with you. You see why I think that this is the covenant text? Just whatever. And with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, and of every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth. And I will establish my covenant with you. I mean, it's very, very specific and clear. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood, neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and earth. How many times does he mention covenant? Like 3 or 4, right? And it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth that the bow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the water shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, this is the token of the covenant, which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth. Now you may see why I distinguish 1 through 7, right, as not necessarily part of the covenant, but it's instruction from God. Because everything he's focused on when he says covenant like 5 times is about the flood, right, and the token sign, which is the rainbow. All right, so we read that, and I know I'm going rather quickly because I'm still trying to get us out on time. What type of a covenant is this? Unconditional or conditional? Unconditional. Unconditional. God says, I will. He has no condition on mankind, right? Now, we could argue that he was well pleased with Noah's sacrifice that happened in Genesis 8, and that may be so, but there's nothing that man does or does not do at this point, right, that earns God's favor to keep him from flooding the earth. He says, I will do it, right? I will, or in this case, I will not do it. So it is unconditional. And so who are the parties of the covenant? Did you catch that? There's multiple.
Animals.
Good. Animals. That's different, right? What else? All flesh. All the earth. People. Future people, right? The seed of Noah. Absolutely. So Noah, his sons, his seed, animals, all the earth. Can we say it's universal? Right? It's a universal covenant. It's a unilateral covenant. The fact that God established on his own, right, is an unconditional covenant. It is a universal covenant for all people. Is it still in effect? Yes. In fact, I mean, not right now because there's no sun, but if there were sun out there, right, we would see a rainbow. And it is still the token or the sign that he gave. And so what are the promises of the covenant? No more, yeah, no more, we have to be really specific here. No more worldwide floods. Absolutely, absolutely, right? Because we see that, in fact, there are floods, there's flooding, and there's catastrophic flooding, localized. And by the way, this isn't about worldview and the truth of the Bible, right? We're trying to constrain this to the covenants of God. But the fact is, some would try and claim that really what happened is this is a localized flood because, the whole earth couldn't flood, and that's preposterous. But in fact, if it were only a localized flood, and that's what the Bible is talking about, then God would be a liar, right? Because he said, I've promised in my covenant, my everlasting covenant with you, not to do this again. And yet we see catastrophic localized flooding. What we have never seen, right, is another worldwide flood, and we will never see that because God has promised that. So he said there will not be a flood to destroy the earth. I mean, it's pretty simple, and there's not as many promises that go with this covenant, maybe as we saw with the Adamic or the Edenic. So we covered that. So why is the Noahic covenant important for us today, right? One, we see that God is not just a God of righteousness and of justice, but a God of grace. He is a God of grace. And he says, Noah found grace, right, in the eyes of the sight of the Lord. And the promise to never again flood the earth is a promise of grace. First and foremost, there's an absolute application that is literal here. Never again, when man sees lightning and starting to see, thunderstorms and torrential rain, never will we wonder, is God going to produce cataclysmic judgment upon us? We understand that God has given us grace. This is literal, right? So we need to make sure we understand. There was a literal flood. There is a literal promise. Yeah, that rain is not going to wipe out the earth, so we're okay. There is a literal promise, right, that God will not do that again. And we see the literal token or sign today continued, right, in the rainbow. And we see the universality of God. God is interested in all of humanity, right? I mean, it is amazing. He didn't just make it with humanity. He made it with animals even, with all the earth. The covenants of God, let me say it this way. God is not interested in only a select few, right? He's interested in everyone, and his grace shows, although there are covenants made with select groups of individuals, as we will see. And the salvation from the flood, of course, so those are the literal things, right, of the flood. And you've got kind of two camps. You've got the literalists, which we are literalists, okay? But you've got the literalists that disavow any type of symbolic additional meaning at all. Everything is only ever literal. And then you've got, right, the allegorists over on this side, which nothing is literal. Everything is a picture of something else. And so first and foremost, it's literal. The rainbow is literal. The flood was literal, right? And the fact that the promise that he will never do it again is literal. But there is also symbolism, right? The flood is a symbol of salvation. It is. And of course, salvation through Christ. obscure as it might be, especially to those without the benefit of the complete Word of God, right? But they did have the Adamic covenant. They did know that there was a promised Savior and that salvation by grace through God was available and, in fact, promised, right? And in fact, this is what Peter says, although he too is somewhat confusing in how he states it in 1 Peter 3:18 through 22. It says, "For Christ also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit, by which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison, which sometime were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is, 8 souls, were saved by water." So you understand, he sets up Christ and he says, like the long suffering of God in the days of Noah, salvation was offered because judgment did come, just like our salvation is offered in Jesus Christ. The like figure whereunto even baptism doth also now save us, not the putting away of the filth of the flesh, not the baptism itself, but the answer of a good conscience toward God by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So he says, look, what happened with the flood is a picture of salvation that we experience through Jesus Christ, for the salvation that was foretold with the Adamic covenant. All right. And again, this isn't super hard, right? It's I don't know, time and time again, if kids are in Sunday school and they go through like grades 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, they've probably gone through the ark like 3 or 4 times. And so one, we want our kids to know that it's actually true, right? It's not a fairy tale. And so this isn't necessarily new, but the Noahic covenant again gives us a window into the grace of God and his unilateral, unconditional, and universal love for mankind. So, is it literal? Yeah. Is it still in effect?
Yep.
Yes. Can man do anything to alter this covenant? No. So, it looks like we're getting a pattern. The Adamic covenant, is it literal? Yes, right? There is coming again. There was coming, right, a seed of the woman that was prophesied that authored salvation for us, right? And he is coming again. That was literal, absolutely. Are we seeing a pattern, right? When the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was not figurative, it was real, right? Satan was not figurative, he was real. And so we have a pattern now of 3 covenants where, and again, everybody's learned all this stuff in Sunday school or in basic Christian truths of discipleship or whatever. So this is not necessarily new. But what we're going to do is we're going to build on that. And the next covenant we get to, the Abrahamic covenant, that's when Christendom goes, right? And they do not agree to whom the covenant is placed, right, or given to. They don't agree what it means. Like all of a sudden, we go from what was very basic, very literal, very much where everybody agrees, but now everybody has a stake in the game. And so then we get to divergent understandings, and maybe not literal, but symbolic. And what does that mean? Or what does this word mean? So we want to establish the pattern that, we understand it's easy to tell whether they're conditional or unconditional. It's easy to understand whether they're still in effect. It's easy to see who the parties are. And all of these covenants are absolutely literal. But as well, God is gracious and he gives us mercy. And we can see that. He seems to point towards his Son, who is the author of salvation. And so while these are literal, we can't divorce ourselves from the symbolic aspect of grace that God shows. So, since this is literal, it also means that the flood was literal and is a universal, worldwide consuming event. The covenant doesn't make sense if we're only dealing with a localized flood. I have to touch on that because so much today, so many Christians are so willing to throw away creation, the flood, everything else that really just guts the Word of God. And you can't stand here and say you believe the Bible and not believe a creation account, not believe a flood account, because then we don't understand the Edenic covenant. It doesn't make any sense. We don't understand the Adamic covenant. And if those things didn't happen, Christ was never promised. That's the case, right? And we don't understand the Noahic covenant. And if those covenants didn't happen, well then how in the world do we ever get to the new covenant, right, that Jesus gave, right, the disciples in the room there when they were taking the Lord's Supper, which that is what we claim. So this is important for Christians, and we need to make sure that we understand it. And again, this is all easy to understand, super easy. When we get to the next couple, they're going to be a little bit trickier to understand. How does it apply to the church? How does it apply to us? How does it apply to Israel? Does it? Is there any intersection? Right? But we want to, because again, these are the major points where God has come down and made a relational agreement, right, with mankind. This is important. It's important for us to understand, especially if we want to know what will happen in the future vis-a-vis what God's word says. So with that, we're 4 minutes early, and any questions? So and this one's pretty straightforward and easy, but any questions? I shouldn't have said that. Then you don't want to ask a question if I say it's straightforward and easy. Anyways, all right, let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for just your word that we can look into, and not just understand individual words or verses, but Lord, that we can look across your word and see your plan. I'm so grateful for that. I'm thankful, Lord, that you bother with mankind, that you bother with us, that so much so that you sent your son to die, Lord, and give of yourself to save us. Lord, I'm so grateful that that is the story of the Bible. I pray that you would help us to understand it, to know it, to live it, and to love it, Lord. And we just ask these things in Jesus' name.